Hello, Packers fans. It's time for another edition of the Pack Attack Cast, brought to you from fans for fans. And we're very excited to bring you an update on the Green Bay Packers today. There are no practice notes for today because it was no open practice. Neither the media nor the public attended any Green Bay Packers activities today. Hopefully, we'll get an update on Tuesday or Wednesday on what's going on with Green Bay practice as they prepare for their preseason game against the New York Jets on Saturday. Just a quick programming note. We will have a pregame edition of the Pack Attack Cast for that game against the Jets that morning, as well as a post-game summary of the events of that game that will either be on Saturday night or Sunday morning. I'll try to break down all the news and notes from that first preseason game against the New York Jets. And I'm very excited about seeing the preseason because I think the preseason is really going to give the Packers depth and opportunity to shine. I do believe the Green Bay Packers are one of the top rosters, top to bottom in the NFL. There's been a lot of people who have been saying a lot of negative things about the Green Bay Packers roster. I don't understand it. We're going to get into it a little later. But I definitely want to talk about what we'll see in the preseason for your Green Bay Packers. And I think that depth, both on the offensive line, defensive line, secondary, and at key players positions, including running back and wide receiver, I think the Green Bay Packers are going to have a nice showing of themselves on Saturday against the Jets. Before I go any further, please give us a like and subscribe on this video. We're trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the start of the season, and we are just 40 away from 4,000, which will be very exciting and great growth for this channel. So please give us a like for this video. And if you haven't already done so, give us a subscribe and join the Pack Attack Cast community. We are glad to have you here. Once again, we don't have any notes from practice today. So I wanted to talk about a couple topics that have been really jumping around in my brain the last week or so. I've seen a lot of rankings right now. It's the type of season where everybody has their rankings for teams, for positions, for units. You know, anything they can come up with to come up with a ranking it's really common right now. And I understand we're trying to fill time before the start of the season. But in far too many of these rankings, these media experts are so, on the one hand, they're complimentary about some aspects of the Packers, but then, you know, it's a backsided compliment because I saw one podcast, which I'm not going to name who it is, but basically they said that the Green Bay Packers have the fourth best roster in the division. And that just made me laugh about how absurd that was. I think there's a lot of preconceived notions there, a lot of people that aren't really keeping track on what's going on in training camp, because I think a lot of what we're seeing in training camp is addressing a lot of those items of concern for a lot of those experts, as I'll put it out there. And I wanted to circle back to one of the biggest concerns that those experts had with the Green Bay Packers when they do these rankings. And it's almost always talking about the pass rush, and it's talking about the secondary for the Green Bay Packers. Even though the Packers were 8th in sacks, and we do need to see more consistency as far as a higher pass rush win rate, I do think the Packers' defensive line has been kind of a source of nitpicking throughout the course of the offseason. So I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about the secondary, which is also one of the big complaints I hear about for the Green Bay Packers in the offseason is you've got all these slot corners that are trying to be outside corners, and I don't know if this is going to work, and how is this going to play. But I don't think they're looking at the individual players. They're just simply saying, Keyshawn Nixon, he's a slot player who got by on the outside last year. Hobbs, he's primarily a slot corner. Even though he's played effectively on the outside, we're just going to kind of ignore that and just say, he's really a slot corner. Carrington Ballentine, he's a 7th round pick. What can we really expect from him? So I want to talk about all these topics right now because it doesn't match up with what I'm seeing in training camp every single practice. Every single practice, there is plenty of evidence that not only is this defensive line ready to take a step up this year, but the secondary is only going to be better than where it was last year. And the secondary was just fine last year. The secondary was not a reason that the Green Bay Packers lost games last year. You could argue the pass rush was. You can argue the inconsistent offense was why the Green Bay Packers lost games. But it certainly wasn't the secondary. So let's talk about what we've seen in camp so far in the preseason. Okay? We've seen LVN and the rest of the defensive line succeed in getting a solid pass rush in camp and consistently getting to the backfield around the quarterback. And this is against a very solid Green Bay Packers offensive line. I was in Green Bay for 3 days for practice. I saw the defensive line consistently finding ways to get into the backfield around the quarterback. Every time I've seen film from the practices where I haven't been at, I've seen the exact same thing. LVN, very successful putting pressure on the quarterback. Rashawn Gary, still consistent at getting pressure on the quarterback. I've seen defensive tackles in the backfield around the quarterback. And this is against a very good defensive line that in the Green Bay Packers. So I'm very excited about what we're seeing so far in training camp, that the defensive line is going to take a step forward, not just Lucas Van Ness, but Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark, now that he's not dealing with a toe injury, as well as the depth in the defensive tackle slots. We're seeing all types of opportunities where the defensive line is looking much better now than they looked last year on a consistency basis. It's not just, LVN got a sack in practice today. It's the fact that every time I look at Jordan Love going back for a pass or Malik Willis going back for a pass, what do I see? I see pressure on that pocket, consistent pressure, and in multiple occasions in a practice, we're seeing the defense getting what would be sacks if they were able to play through the whistle. So I'm very excited about this on the defensive line. In addition, in practice, we're seeing Nixon, Hobbs, and Ballentine making plays every single practice against a very good wide receiver core. We're seeing consistently news from the practices that Nixon's making plays against Dobbs, that Hobbs is making good plays. Ballentine before family night was leading the secondary on interceptions. So there's no question from what I'm seeing against good receivers from the Green Bay Packers, this secondary is holding up on winning more often than not. This secondary looks like it's going to prove the experts wrong. And it's not just that the defensive line and the secondary are playing, in my opinion, better than this point last year. It's the fact that these are interlocked units. And what I mean by that is the secondary needs the defensive line to get pressure on the quarterback, and the defensive line needs the secondary to hold up long enough for them to get to the quarterback. And if both of these units are playing well, I think we're going to be in great shape, because both of these units are weak link systems. So, especially the secondary. The secondary does not have to hold up indefinitely against wide receivers. That's an impossible task. What they need to do is hold up long enough for the defensive line to get to the quarterback. And I think I've seen enough from both of these units to feel that all these media experts that say the Packers don't have a great roster are full of it. They're not looking deep into it. They're saying Corey Ballentine, 7th round pick. They're not looking at the tape. You look at the tape, and Ballentine is playing good against starting NFL wide receivers. So are Nixon. So are Hobbs. And the second and the safeties as well are playing equally as well. So I have every confidence to believe that the defensive line and the secondary issues are completely overblown by the media and by people who aren't watching the day in and day out of this team. I'm very confident that we're going to see in the preseason, we're going to see this narrative shift. In the preseason, we're going to see the Packers secondary play well. We're going to see the defensive line get sacks in the preseason. And we're going to start to see a narrative from other people that are going to say, hey, you know what? Maybe the Packers aren't so bad. Maybe we were nitpicking the Packers way too much. So that's what I'm excited to see, starting with the preseason game this coming Saturday night. Topic number 2 for today, and this was great news. It broke right before I came on for my stream. Corey Ballentine was re-signed by the Green Bay Packers. He was playing for the Colts. The Colts waived him, and the Packers immediately grabbed him. Corey Ballentine has started a number of games for the Green Bay Packers. He's played on special teams for the Green Bay Packers. He is a Green Bay Packer, and he's going to fit right back into this roster very quickly and effectively, and immediately increases the competition in that safety, in the corner room, to see who's going to be on the active roster. So I think this was a great pickup, not only for the corner, but also for special teams, where he was a very good special teams player for the Green Bay Packers. So I'm excited about this. Don't be surprised if you see Corey Ballentine jump right into this secondary and be an effective component for this secondary. I'll bet you he actually gets into the preseason games over the next couple weeks, maybe as early as Saturday, because normally the first preseason game is a relatively vanilla game. So I could see Corey Ballentine, with his experience in this defense, getting into that game on Saturday. So I'm very excited about that. Topic number 3, since it's a relatively light news day, I wanted to play a game that I'm going to call Packers, Eagles, or both. And I've talked about in past videos earlier on in the summer that the Packers in most power rankings are kind of ranked 8th or 9th right now. The Eagles were also ranked 8th on many preseason rankings last year, and we know they went on to win the Super Bowl. So I've seen a really strong correlation between what we've seen from the Eagles last year and the Packers this year. I'm seeing a lot of similar comments, a lot of similar concerns, that if you go back and look at the Eagles last preseason, the media was saying some of the same things they're saying about the Green Bay Packers this year. And I do feel like there's a correlation here. So I'm going to speak a statement, and we're going to decide if it comes from the Packers of 2025 or the Eagles of 2024 or both teams. And I think you're going to kind of see what I'm seeing here, that there is a strong correlation here. The key here is the Eagles, if you looked at last preseason, were far from the favorite contender for the Super Bowl this time last year. In fact, the largest consensus number one pick for the Super Bowl last year was the 49ers. 49ers and Chiefs was the number one prediction for the Super Bowl last year. In fact, the Packers were actually picked more often than the Eagles to be a hot pick to win the Super Bowl last year. And yet, when I look at the roster for the Packers in 2025, it is so much better than what we had on the field against the Eagles in the playoffs last year. And the Eagles are being open, and the Packers are openly being dismissed as an okay team. I see that consistently. They're okay. They're not the best in their division, but they're spunky and they'll be competitive. I don't understand. I've heard analysts say the Packers have the fourth best roster in the division for the NFC North. I don't know why they're saying that, but I have seen that on multiple occasions. So let's look at the comments that I have found and try to figure out if they're talking about the 2025 Packers, the 2024 Eagles, or both teams. And you might be surprised how these comments really echo the Eagles last year. All right, comment number 1. I have serious concerns about offensive efficiency. Which team was that said about? Was it said about the 2025 Packers or the 2024 Eagles? The answer is both teams. So 2025 Packers, 2024 Eagles, both of those teams, I've heard comments about, I have serious concerns about their offensive efficiency. And look what the Eagles did last year. Next up, I have serious concerns about their roster and starters at key positions. All right, which team was that? 2024 Eagles and the 2025 Packers have had that comment. I have serious concerns about their rosters and starters at key positions. That was said about the Super Bowl champions just last preseason. All right. Next comment. I don't know if they're getting the right leadership from the quarterback position. I'll give you a beat. That was said by about the 2024 Eagles last preseason. One thing that we've heard about Jordan Love so far in this offseason is that he is showing leadership in training camp and in practice. So I'm excited about saying that Jordan Love is ahead of where Jalen Hurts was last year. I believe Jordan Love is a better quarterback than Hurts. Super Bowls or not, I still believe Jordan Love is the better quarterback. Next up, their defense fell apart at the end of the season last year. Am I talking about the 2024 Packers, 2025 Packers, or the 2024 Eagles? The answer is both. You look at the 2023 Eagles, their defense fell apart at the end of the 2023 season. You look at the Packers, their last 4 games, their defense was not as good as it was at the midpoint of the season. So again, there's a correlation here between the Eagles last year and the Packers this year. This team has a major item of concern in its leadership at the quarterback position. Again, that was the 2024 Eagles. Sorry, that was a duplicate there. So What is the purpose of this segment of my video today? The purpose of this segment is last year, the Eagles were not the favorite to win the Super Bowl. In fact, they were considered the 8th or ninth best team, just like the Packers this year. The Eagles had very similar problems with their roster and how they performed the year before as the Green Bay Packers do this year. So there's a clear correlation in my mind that the Green Bay Packers can, in the same way the Eagles were an upstart surprise team, the Green Bay Packers can take their division and go deep into the playoffs just the way the Eagles did last year. So that's this edition of the Pack Attack Cast. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We'll be hopefully back with more news and notes for the Green Bay Packers on Tuesday. If we don't have any training camp notes, because again, I don't think the media or fans are going to be attending practice on Tuesday, I'll have some other topics we can talk about, and we'll see you then. As always, go Pack Go.